Hey everybody, Brian here. Today I'm going to show you the super useful process of converting an old computer to work as a virtual machine in a new computer. And I know when you hear the word virtual, you tend to think of cheesiness, and rightfully so, but these days virtual machines can run pretty awesomely. It's sort of like reviving American muscle cars, so it's kind of retro and pretty cool. And in my case, I see about a 700% performance increase after the conversion to a VM, which is pretty wild. Anyway, I'm going to show you how to do this conversion on the Mac side using VMware Fusion, which is free. On the Windows side using VMware Workstation, also free. I know our old computers sometimes feel like relics of some post-apocalyptic world or something. In my case, maybe a biological experiment gone wrong. All sorts of weird, nasty stuff inside. So I have a Windows XP machine, 10 to 12 years old. I haven't turned it on for maybe 2 to 3 years, which is why it's looking so nasty inside. Here's what we have in the new computer as far as some of the key components. And I have a whole video series on this build, including how I set up Windows and Mac Sonoma. So definitely time to convert. In my case, it makes sense because I have music programs, projects in here on XP. It would be a total, utter nightmare to convert that stuff to work on a new computer. And I don't feel the need to convert and work in Windows 11 or Mac Sonoma. I don't feel the need to use new programs, AI, any of that stuff. In fact, there's an interesting study about AI, how it tends to only be useful for creators who are not creative. Kind of intuitive, interesting result, actually. So for me, I've never used AI to create anything. I don't think it's ever impacted my creativity. I think creativity is at its best when you let it happen, when you find ways to let inspiration arrive and then let your brain kind of work with that inspiration, process the ideas to the point where you're then ready to compose, arrange, orchestrate, all those things that are actually really important for music production, as opposed to this mindset that some people are propagating on YouTube where, hey, let me show you how to use AI, you can produce a song a day, get your streams up on Spotify. I mean, are there really listeners that expect that of an artist, that they can produce a song a day or a song a week? I don't think so. I think most people understand on some level that music is about connecting with people based on real ideas, real connections, not some sort of click a button so AI got this produced quicker for you to listen to. And as far as I know, there's no AI to brain interface that actually helps with the creativity, Whatever Elon Musk is doing with that Neuralink, I don't think that's doing that. So anyway, that's a long aside. Let's get to the conversion. Obviously, an important first step is connecting everything that you need connected. Power. I have a Link C PCI audio card. I actually won't be using that. It's an awesome card, but instead I'll use my RME Babyface Pro USB 2 device. I also have a UED1 DSP card, which was novel at the time for running music production plugins. I would have to convert that to PCIe or upgrade to a UAD2 card or something. Instead, I'm just going to find alternative plugins for those programs that are using them. As to the monitor, I don't even know what that kind of connection is called. Though I also had a HDMI option. Something crazy there with a Wi-Fi antenna. No problem, because in the VM we'll just pass through the real machine's internet. So we'll have connectivity that way. I have some dongles to authenticate some of my programs in XP. Those, believe it or not, will work in the VM. And you'll need a USB stick containing some tools that I'm going to show you. And obviously don't forget to connect your keyboard and mouse. And then there's the power switch. So let's press that. Okay, we have lights blinking. Let's see what's happening here. It's detecting various hardware. Okay, CPU fan error. I'm not sure what that's about, but I see the CPU fan is actually spinning. So let's press F1 to resume. Okay, that's a good sign. The boot menu. And let's see how this goes. Heard some clicking sounds over here. There's a cursor. Alright, so we are in XP and let's continue. So I booted into XP, and I'm not going to worry about this found hardware wizard. I'm going to just cancel out of that because I don't really care about the physical hardware anymore on this computer because we're going to use the virtual hardware. And there's some tools that we need, and I can tell you this because through trial and error I figured out how to do this successfully on my system. For you it might differ, so it's important to understand there are several options available. So make sure you have a USB drive, and I have links to these tools. First thing to try is the VMware Converter. I'm using version 6.1. I've tried other versions, I've tried 6.2, and they all produce various failures. And this was the only one that I could get to work. So at least on XP, you might have luck with other versions if you're trying to convert Windows 7 or something. So I'm just going to drag this to my desktop. Okay, it's already there. And then MergeIDE. This is something that you'll need if VMware Converter doesn't work. This is kind of complicated to explain, but it has to do with the fact that Windows XP, if it runs on a different computer and sees that disk drives are using different hardware, it'll give a blue screen. So this MergeIDE is just simply a registry fix. We can run it even if we're going to use VMware Converter. So it's a good idea to just run it anyway. So open that up, extract somewhere. I extracted it to download, so I'm just going to go there. And then there's a .bat file, and some people are wary running .bats, but this is a tried and true program. There's nothing fishy going on here. It just adjusts the registry so that Windows will not produce that blue screen when trying to boot up in a VM. And you can always back up your registry so that you can revert back to how it was on the physical XP machine. So I've already ran it, but I can run it again. And by the way, it doesn't give you any time to see what was shown on the screen. One way to fix that is just edit it. It's in German. And at the very end, just add pause. That way you'll have some time to look at what it's producing on the terminal window. So I'll run that again. Here it says Eintragen der Registry Settings erledigt. That basically means that it completed the action, and now press any key to continue. So that was a good first step, because if you end up needing to use something like CloneZilla, which I'm going to show you later, then this is definitely needed. And like I said, it's not going to mess up any of these other conversion tools that you might be able to use. So back to VMware Converter. That's the best bet to get this working as smoothly and quickly as possible. So I have this VMware Converter 6.1.1. So we're going to run this VMware Converter program. It's the install program. It took quite a while for this installer to launch. Don't be worried if that happens to you. Eventually you should see this kind of window. And I'm going to hit run. And now it's going to install the VMware Converter Standalone. Next. Next. I agree. Next. Next. Local installation is what we want. We're not running this over a server, over a network or anything. I don't think I'm going to join that customer experience improvement program. Next. And install. It's going to take a little bit, so I'll skip ahead. Okay, and now for the real tense moment to actually try to run it. By the way, I tried to use 6.2 of this program and I got this far, and when I tried to run it, the computer froze. There was all sorts of trouble with that version, so for trial and error, I know this should work. Finish. Okay, so this is what you want to see. And the first thing to do is click where it says Convert Machine and select Source Type. Because it's powered on, you want to keep that selected. And this local machine, we're not doing anything remotely. That's all you need to do there. And then hit Next. And now it's looking at some information about your setup. The destination type. You can make sure VMware Workstation or other VMware virtual machine is selected. First, I'm showing how to do this for a Mac. And we're running Fusion on the Mac, so I'm just going to keep the highest version of Fusion shown here. Don't worry if that's an earlier version compared to what you're going to run on the Mac. Give your computer some name, as well as a location. So make sure you have a USB drive installed that can fit the OS and the data that you're trying to convert. This is different from the USB drive that had the tools and the converter. So in my case, it's this T9 USB, and then next. And now, in my case, I had a system drive, that was the C drive. I also had these other drives, and you might have a similar situation, especially if you were doing music production on an XP machine, where you tended to have separate drives for audio, samples, stuff like that. So I have C, D, and E. That's what I want to bring over. If you don't want to bring something over, then just click on Edit and uncheck something. And a lot of this you can change after the fact. It's going to set the virtual machine to have 1 gig of memory, which will be fine at first, and it's easy enough to change after. You don't have to touch networks. That can all be configured after. Advanced options, for now, nothing to worry about. Throttling, no need whatsoever to touch that. That's what I did anyway. I kept all these as default. And now next. And now you see a review of the conversion. And hit finish. Okay, this might take a while, so we're going to skip ahead. Here I am on 1%. It's telling me an hour or so remaining. We'll see how that actually goes. Okay, so we're done with that conversion. In my case, it took over 6 hours. I think that's because with those audio and sample drives, there were thousands of files, so the converter probably has to do all sorts of extra processing. In your case, if you're, say, just converting a system drive with not too much data, then this shouldn't take much more than 20 or 30 minutes. In any case, this is what you're looking for. Status completed. And now let's take a look at the USB drive. You won't see this. This is from a Parallels conversion that I did. I'll show you that in a later video if you want to use Parallels. So here's what the VMware Standalone Converter created. A folder called Audio System. Yours might be called something different. And then you'll see these VMDK files for each drive that you selected. Remember when we chose the drives we want to be included in the conversion, I chose 3. So this one is my system drive, and these other 2 are those audio and samples drives that I have. And then there's this .vmx file. So that's what you need to have. So with these in hand, we can go over to our Mac computer and get VMware Fusion fired up and import these files and get XP up and running as a virtual machine. Okay, now I'm in Mac Sonoma. Now the next step is to download the VMware Fusion program. And this can be a little tricky to find actually, so I'm going to show you how I downloaded it. I googled download VMware Fusion, and then there's this blog that talks about the free for personal use version. So I click on that, and then scroll a little bit, and there's a link that says VMware Fusion Pro download. So you click that. Now at this point, you need to set up a Broadcom account. Now because I've already logged in once, it remembered me and I'm already logged in, but you're gonna have to go through that process. And then once you have an account set up, you're gonna see this little icon here that indicates the kind of products that you're browsing right now. I think by default it might be set to mainframe software or enterprise or something. It's not going to be set to VMware Cloud Foundation at first, so you need to make sure that's what's chosen up here. VMware Cloud Foundation. And then you want to make sure My Downloads is clicked on the left, and then just find VMware Fusion in this big list. Here it is, and you click on it. And you'll see the versions available. So here we have VMware Fusion 13 Pro for personal use. So you click that, and then click on the latest release. And here's the download link. Now, when you first do this, you're probably going to see a message saying you don't have an entitlement to download. And then there'll be some little icon up here, I think, telling you to take some actions, confirming your account or something. Anyway, it'll be pretty clear what you have to do to set up that entitlement. And after you've done that step, then you'll be able to download it. So you click on the download link, In the browser, it might ask you if you want to allow download. You hit yes. In my case, I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to download it a second time. So you'll end up with this 500 and something megabyte file. It's a .dmg like any other Mac install file. And so you just run that like any old application on a Mac. At this point, you've installed VMware Fusion. You can confirm that by going to your applications folder. There it is, VMware Fusion. When we did the conversion on the Win XP machine or on whatever machine you did your conversion on, you may have chosen a USB drive for the converted files to be stored to. So I have this folder called Audio System. That's what the VMware converter created on my USB drive. And I don't want to work off that USB drive. I want to work off a local drive on my Mac. So I created a folder called Win XP VM in my Documents folder on the Mac. And first I'm just going to drag this over. It'll take a few minutes, so I'll skip ahead. That folder is now on my Mac. Inside you'll see VMDK files, one or more. I have 3 because during the physical conversion I chose 3 drives. A system drive, an audio drive, and a samples drive. So what you have here might be a little different, and obviously everything will be named differently. Then there'll be this .vmx file. This is what we can double click to launch the VM for the first time. So let's do that and hope good things will happen. And we'll get this message until we take an action to make some settings changes. Hit OK for now. And this might have to do with a virtual printer that we'll remove later. This might have to do with a CD DVD device. Hit yes for now. We'll try to get rid of these messages later, but they're not critical either way. Okay, so in the meantime, Windows XP looks like it's trying to launch. If you don't see a blue screen at this point, that's a good sign. If you see similar messages, it might be because of programs that depend on the physical motherboard that your old operating system was running on. I'll uninstall those programs a little later. And now that we have the VM successfully launched, we'll want to make some configuration changes. And one of the first things we can do right off the bat is just adjust the display. So I'm right-clicking, Properties, Settings. 640 by 480 doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense on a computer. I'm going to change that to fit what my monitor can support. 1920 by 1080 is fine. Apply, yes, okay. And at this point, a lot of functionality will not work if you don't have VMware tools installed. So that should be one of the first steps you take. Go to Virtual Machine, install VMware tools, click that. You might think something useful will happen. Instead, you're told it can't do anything because it's a legacy operating system, but it gives you a link. I'm going to right-click that, copy link. That's going to download an ISO file. We need that in the VM, but it's very tricky to get files copied from the host into the VM at this point. Things like drag and drop, copying, pasting from the host to the VM don't seem to work right away. So that's why we need to download that ISO on the Mac side. So I'm going to open up a browser on the Mac and copy that link in. There's nothing fishy about it, nothing weird going on. It's not a big file, so it'll download pretty quickly. Also, you might get these found new hardware wizard messages. You can cancel out of those. You might see 2 of them. That has to do with the VMware expecting certain things to be in place that will only be in place after we get those tools installed. So now on your Mac, go to your Downloads folder. And here I see that .iso file that I just downloaded. I'm going to double click it. It's now mounted in the Mac. Here it is, VMware Tools. If you double click it, you see that there's a setup file. Close out of that for now. And let's hit no for now here. Now go to Virtual Machine, CD, DVD, choose Disk or Disk Image. And now choose your Downloads folder on the Mac. There it is, WinPreVista.iso. Now hit open. Now go to Virtual Machine, CD, DVD, connect. Now go to my computer. And now you should see this F drive, or it might be called something else, depending on how many drives you actually have. Now double click. And here's that setup file that's now in your VM environment. So I'm going to launch that. Next, typical, next, install, and finish. It wants to restart the computer. For now, I'm going to hit no. Because while we're here, there's a couple of things we can do to minimize the number of restarts we have to do. Go to Start, Settings, Control Panel. The first time you launch Control Panel, you might have to wait a few minutes, so don't be alarmed if that happens. I'm going to go to Add Remove Programs, because I was seeing these errors at first upon startup that have to do with programs that are not needed here in a VM. Remove any programs that you didn't remove on your physical computer. Maybe you forgot to remove something. You definitely don't want unneeded junk in a VM. You might be told to restart when you're uninstalling programs. Just wait till the very end to do a restart. Now go to System, Hardware, Device Manager. We no longer have those annoying yellow triangles here. When we installed the VMware tools, that took care of all the necessary drivers that were missing. Also at this point, you can check your drive lettering. On my original computer, I had my OS disk as C and audio drive as D and samples as E. So it's important that I have that ordering here. Otherwise, certain audio programs that are looking to stream files off a given physical disk won't work. I'll have to redo the paths. So if you need to change something like that, just go to Settings, Control Panel, Administrative Tools, Computer Management, Disk Management, and then that's where you can change drive letters if you have to. Okay, one other thing we can do is test, see if we have internet. I don't. I've noticed that I have to set the network adapter to NAT. So I'm going into network adapter settings. I'm going to switch this to share with my Mac. So that now is this NAT option. The second network adapter is set to bridged. You can keep that as is. That way you have a couple options in case one doesn't work. And now I'm going to try again to connect to the network, to the internet. And now it looks like it's working. Yep, so that's good. At this point, let's shut down the machine and then make some configuration changes. So I'm going to virtual machine, shut down. Yes, I'm sure. Not sure what PW save is. I'll choose end now. Not sure if you'll see that, but if you do, just end it. Now go back to virtual machine, settings, under general. Sometimes you'll see a message here saying you can clean up the machine and save some space. Go back by hitting show all. Under sharing, hit enable shared folders. I'm going to add my Mac downloads folder here. You can also mirror folders, which would probably be useful, but I'm going to ignore that for now. Go back. You can make some mouse keyboard changes here. I'm going to keep everything as default. In the processors and memory, I can choose up to 16 cores, even though I have an Intel i7 14700K. We'll need to make one adjustment to increase that amount of cores available. I'll show you that in a second. I'm going to increase the memory to 4 gigabytes. You can choose whatever makes sense given your actual available RAM and how much you want available on the VM versus on your host machine. Go back. Display, check Accelerate 3D Graphics if you have that option. Under Shared Graphics Memory, you might see up to 2 gigabytes. When we make a small change in a minute, that'll increase. For now, go back. Network adapter, we set the first one to NAT. Go back. The second one is bridged auto detect. You'll want to set these up depending on your system. I have 3 hard disks corresponding to the 3 physical disks that I converted. And for any one of these drives, you can change its storage size. So you click on it, change it up or down as needed. You can also add drives by going to Add Device. You can add a brand new virtual disk by clicking here and then Add. Give it some name and then some size. Or you could add an existing virtual hard drive. So maybe you ran VMware Converter on some other disk. So click here, add, and then you would browse to wherever you have some .vmdk file. CD, DVD, that's what we use to run that VMware's installer. If you know you don't need that in the future, you can just remove the CD, DVD drive. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can always add it later when you know you'll need it. Sound card I'm keeping as is. Later I'm going to use my USB audio device and I'll show you how to set that up. USB, there's not much to do here. You tend to work with USB once you have the VM up and running. Go back. Printer, no sense in having that, so remove it. Startup disk, I'm going to keep this as is. You can change this as needed. Encryption is off. I'll keep that as is. I'm not too worried. Compatibility, this is an important one. In order for a VM, even an old operating system like XP, to be able to interact with the new hardware on, say, a motherboard like what I have here, an Asus Z790 ProArt Creator and a fairly new Intel CPU, you need to make sure that the hardware version is upgraded. So right now it's on 11, 21's available, so I'm going to hit upgrade. I'm going to go back. Isolation, I'm going to keep these checked, enable drag and drop and copy and paste. Go back under advanced. If you don't want to see this side channel mitigations message every time you launch the VM, just check off here. Go back. And I go back to processors and memory. Remember before we saw 16 cores, then we updated that virtual hardware version to 21. Now I see 28 cores. This makes sense given a i7-14700K CPU. Now I can take advantage of all the cores and hyperthreads. What you choose here depends on how intensive you want the VM to be compared to what the host requires. So you'll find some compromise based on your situation. I'm just going to keep it set to 4 cores for now. Go back. Under display. Remember before we could only choose up to 2 gigabytes. Now we have 8 available. I'll go ahead and choose that. If you have a Retina display, maybe check off use full resolution. Otherwise I'm keeping everything as is. Okay, so we made some changes, and I'll go back into the VM. By the way, I notice sometimes when I click that start button, it doesn't work and I have to restart VMware Fusion. So keep that in mind if you have that problem. Okay, so we're back up and running. Now you'll notice this VMware shared folders option if you set that up in the config settings. So if I click on that, I see my Mac's download folder that I added as a shared folder. That's also accessible in my computer. Shared folders. You might have some other stuff from your physical machine. I actually have a shared drive from when I was studying at the Naval Postgraduate School. So I'll disconnect that. This is also from when I was studying there. Disconnect that. Shared documents I don't need. That's also from when I had this set up previously. So I'm going to go sharing and security. Unclick this. Apply. Okay. Another cleanup sort of task we can do is look here in the system tray. Here's some networking related junk that we don't need. So you can go to Start, Settings, Network Connections, or just open it up directly here. Open Network Connections. And I see this local area, connection 7, TAP, Windows adapter. That's something from the physical XP machine that's not needed here. Not sure why I can't delete it. That might be because of a program that's installed. So I'm going to go to Settings, Control Panel, Add Remove Programs, and I'm going to delete anything that's network related. Get rid of this VPN program. That's just something I missed earlier. I didn't uninstall it. Get rid of this TAP Windows program. Okay, so that got rid of one of those connections. The other two here are the VMware adapters, so you want those. I have a Samsung mobile modem connection. That's definitely not needed, so I'm going to delete that. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, that's just something else you can do to make sure that this VM version of XP doesn't have any bloat, anything not needed. And for now, since I know I'm connecting to the internet through that NAT adapter in VMware, I'm just going to disable this one. This is the second VMware network adapter. So there, I just don't like seeing those annoying yellow triangles and stuff like that. And by the way, I forgot to mention it, the way you connect any given USB device is through this menu item here. So if you have a USB drive that you connected and you want it available in the VM, just choose it. For instance, I have this new volume. I wasn't feeling creative that day to come up with a name for it. So it's new volume under my computer. I now see that. There it is. You'll probably want to confirm that drag and drop is working, so I'm just going to go to my downloads folder and copy something over from the Mac onto my desktop in the VM. So there, that's working. I'll delete it. Also test that copy and paste is working. I'll run Notepad, type something, copy it, and then on the Mac, open up a text editor, paste that in. There it is. Go the other direction, type something, copy that, paste it into Notepad. There's that. So now you've tested a lot of the functionality is working as it should. At this point you can even run a benchmark. Why not, right? So let's try Geekbench. You need to download a legacy version. Proceed. So we'll download that. Keep it. Run it. Next. Install. Run Geekbench. Later. Now run a benchmark. Internet Explorer doesn't want to open that link, so I'm going to hit Control-C, copy the link, go back to Chrome, paste that in, enter, advanced, proceed. So there's our score. Now what you can do is try to gain some performance by going back to settings, processors. That requires that you shut down the machine. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to go back to settings, processors and memory, change that to say 16, telling us that's problematic. Let's try it anyway. Start, enter. Okay, we're in Windows again. And now for the heck of it, let's do another Geekbench test. And this is sort of like the comeback that is happening with American muscle cars. So these old operating systems, running them on new computers, it's kind of retro. So we're back in Geekbench. Copy that link from Internet Explorer, paste it into Chrome. And there we have 34,000 something compared to around 4,000 or so when I ran it on the actual XP machine. So it's pretty interesting, right? That you can take these old OSs and make them work a lot better on a modern computer. Everything prior to this point in the video was for the general process to get Windows XP set up in a virtual environment in VMware Fusion. Now I'm going to show you some audio application specific steps that I'm going to take to get things working. So if this doesn't apply to you, feel free to just end the video. So one thing to do in this case, because I'm using Cubase SX3, is I have to make sure the dongles that I have connected, these USB dongles, are going to be recognized in the VM. So I go up to the virtual machine, under USB. One of these dongles is showing up as this WIBU box U, so I connect that. And then the other dongle is this eLicenser Protected Executor. Pretty diabolical name, huh? I'll connect that so it can do its executing. And then after I've connected those dongles, I'm seeing these hardware wizard windows pop up. So I'm going to choose yes, next. That installed one of the USB dongles, finish. And then another window should pop up here because I have two devices. So yes, next, install, next, finish. Okay, so the two USB dongles are now ready to be used. And the ultimate test now is to launch a music production program. So I have Cubase SX3. I'm going to double click on that, and it says initializing protection. If it gets through this, that means the dongle is okay. Ignore those messages about testing the audio system. Okay, so we know the dongle for Cubase is working. Now I'm going to open a previous project that I've been wanting to return to for several years. So here it is. Open. Getting a message about physical memory being low, but I don't think that's a problem actually. I'll hit yes. UAD powered plugins are not going to work because I don't have my UAD1 DSP PCI card plugged into the new computer. That card will not be able to work on the new computer. Okay, so this project loaded. It has a combination of MIDI and audio tracks. Now we can go to devices, VST instruments, and all these VST plugins, they loaded fine. I don't have to reauthorize them or anything, which is pretty convenient. I thought that might be a problem, but everything just carried over beautifully from the real machine to this virtual environment. And now I can test the other USB dongle that's attached to this Culture plugin, so I can try to add an instance of that. And if the dongle wasn't working at this point, I would get a message telling me there's no connected protection device. So that's working. Everything looks great. Now the next step is to connect the sound card. I'm using this RME Babyface Pro USB audio device. So I go to virtual machine. You might think you go to sound card, connect, but you go under USB in this case because it's a USB sound card. And I'm choosing connect RME Babyface Pro. And once I connect that, I'm going to lose audio on the screen recorder that I'm using. So right now it's seeing the audio. So I'm going to have to do a little workaround once I choose that. Connect up. Once I chose that USB audio device in the VM, I lost that audio on the Mac in the screen recording software. So now I have no output there, and I'm going to have to record the audio in the VM now. Otherwise, I would need separate audio cards or use some kind of virtual audio cable solution. But recording it there in the VM won't be a problem. So we're back, and this is a pretty good example of how to use the RME Total Mix app to do some interesting routing. So I no longer can record the audio this way in the Mac, so I've switched over to using Reaper here in this virtual XM environment. I have one track here recording my voice, that's this one here, and the other track is going to record from Cubase. So what I've done is I've selected a stereo track that corresponds to ADAT 1 and 2, and in Cubase what I do is under Devices, under VST Connections, I have the output going to ADAT 1 and 2. And then in the Total Mix mixer, that corresponds to this AS12. And what I've done is I've enabled loopback. There's that. What that means is when Cubase is outputting to that AS12 output, that ADAT12 output, it's going to be rerouted back to the ADAT12 inputs. So that's why I've chosen those here, and I've armed this track. So I'm going to choose a point in this song where there's some MIDI instruments and audio, and hit play and see what happens. Okay, so I have audio output, both the audio tracks and MIDI. Everything's working. Okay, for some reason, whenever I go to Total Mix, Cubase stops working. Okay, so we're back, and I figured out what the problem was. In any given audio program, you're probably going to find some option that deals with how it handles releasing an audio device so that other programs can use it. In Cubase, I thought by being here in Device Setup on a VST Audio Bay that I needed to check Release As Your Driver and Background, but apparently I needed to do the opposite. So now it looks like things are working fine. I can go in the Total Mix mixer and it's not going to have anything turn off. So I can now go back into Cubase, hit play, and once again we have audio, and I'll need to lower that level so that I can talk over the music. So now that's getting recorded at a lower level. So this is a pretty rigorous test. We've not only confirmed that we can get audio applications working fine under some pretty interesting circumstances, such as the presence of USB dongles, but we also have some pretty sophisticated audio routing going on using the great RME Total Mix app. So this is a pretty awesome ability to be able to take this old XP setup, bring it into a modern computing environment. I could do anything that I want to do with this project now. I could create stems so that I could work on those on the Mac side. I can do some work staying in XP. I have every possible variant open to me in my creative workflow, which is fantastic. So now let's see what happens when I try to return to an old video editing project. Now I'm going to open a Vegas Pro project that I've been wanting to revisit. This is from a few years ago when I took a cinematography class. Here's the project, so I'm going to open this, see what happens. Okay, so here's this project. This is from when my wife and I were living on the Adriatic coast in Montenegro. And the first thing to note is it looks pretty awful here. That's because when I was using my XP machine then, I had to set this preview quality to draft quarter, which is the worst possible quality. Otherwise, playback and scrubbing, everything was just pretty awful. Not that it was a big project, 1280, 720. But that's what I had to do. So now one major test will be to see if I can change this to the best possible setting. And that would be best full. And see if I can scrub through it. And it looks like I can. And now what I want to do is play it back during a time when there's a lot going on. So the part that's the most computationally intensive for the project, that's around here, I think. But first I have to do what I did in Cubase, make sure that the playback is going to that ADAT12 audio output so that Reaper can then capture it here. So audio device, I'm going to choose the Fireface USB, and change these outputs to ADAT12. I think I just need to change this one, the default stereo, but I'll change all three here. Okay, and now if I hit play, this audio should show up here. Okay, there it is. We bump up that level a little bit. Okay, so video playback is smooth, no problems with the audio. So this is a pretty good confirmation so that I can work on a video editing project on the XP machine in the virtual environment, which is pretty awesome if you think about it. You know, this is sort of like going back in time, very retro, which can be therapeutic. Well, if that point in time was something positive for you. In any case, this gives me total flexibility. I could continue working on the project here in Vegas Pro. I could try working on it on the Mac, though I've been having some trouble trying to convert this so that I can open it, import it in Final Cut Pro. But in any case, I have all the flexibility available to me, and as a creator, that's a pretty awesome thing when you have various workflows open to you and the ability to easily integrate between two of them with things like drag, drop, copy and paste. So these tests showed you how to combine the old with the new in this retro, technological kind of parallel world here. And maybe now you can revisit some projects you've had in the back of your minds. So there we have it. We converted an old XP machine, 10 to 12 years old, brought it into a virtual machine on Mac Sonoma using VMware Fusion on a brand new computer, pretty much, running new hardware. No longer have to worry about running XP natively on that crazy biological experiment of a computer. Now we have all the benefits of running it on a new computer. So there it is in the new environment, and I confirmed everything works. I can run my old audio programs, even with dongles. I can open old video projects and run them at the highest quality, scrub through them easily, whereas on the old machine, that was a nightmare. So all in all, this is a pretty positive thing. I'm happy. I don't have to worry about the Lynx audio card anymore. Everything's running through the Babyface Army Pro. So hopefully you found this interesting and you can apply what you've learned to your own situation.